Hey guys, Nick here from D&D Character Creations, and I had a friend say that they were going to be doing a Ravenloft campaign, and then asked me about, some of the undead patrons and some of the cool things, and I was talking to them about Damphir and vampires and stuff. So they were like, "Oh, it'd be really great if I knew more about playing a vampire or vampire adjacent character in Ravenloft." So I decided to do this VOD for my thoughts on characters who want to play vampire like characters. So the title of this episode is So You Want to Play a Vampire? Um, so when we play a vampire, and I'm going to go down here again, this is a little bit of bonus content, but I want to start with the Damphir. So the Damphir is really like your kind of like your starting point for a lot of stuff. And what I loved about Van Richter's guide was that it kind of gave you some vampire or Damphir traits that the new 5.5 Damphir seems to be missing. So, for example, what are the hungers? We could talk about blood, flesh, or raw meat. What are the things, psychic energy? These are the things that they hunger for. Life energy. So, like, when you're thinking about a Damphir, are you thinking about hunger? The other thing we would talk about when we're talking about Damphirs and vampires is what kind are you? What are you role playing to? Like, so you've got your Alucards, right? Who you've got your like good version of a Damphir, someone who is rebelling against, kind of what the vampires stand for. You could also, I think, go into the anti-hero, like a Blade kind of a Damphir. I also say that there's room in here when we're doing an evil campaign, like in Ravenloft. There is also a room for like the Dexter sort of Damphir, and this is a vampire or Damphir that hunts other monsters, like let's say that you have someone who they're hunting the killers. They want to be the most predator, and to because they're predatory by nature. So now you want to be the apex. So you're along with the party, but your goals are more to show that you are the strongest. You want to take down the people that think they are the strongest, and there's some internal hunt, kind of like I'm hunting these people who think they're strong, and then I'm proving that they're not, or that and therefore am my strength in the same way. So like there's a lot of ways that you can play a Damphir. There was one Damphir that I had personally played who fed on psychic energy, and when we talk about psychic energy, I feel that it's more like emotion. So they're a vampire that feeds off of fear, or maybe they're a vampire that feeds off of certain emotion, joy or happiness. Life energy is pretty easy because it's sort of like when you siphon energy from another person, like a necrotic touch, which we'll get into a little bit. Blood is easy. We could say like when mechanically, you could say like when an enemy is bloodied, they're satiated because they've spilt blood. They don't necessarily need to drink it. I think people like, yes, that's part of it, but it could also just be like the action. They're a more violent character, right? So we could play into something like that. And then like how you became, I always like the origins too. Like, how did you become a vampire? Like, you survived or a Damphir. How did you, were you in an attack and you were bitten but not turned? Are you the product of like Alucard? Are you a product of a vampire, father or mother and a human other parent? Like, so there's a lot in there. So I feel like there's a lot of latitude here on where you can go with a Damphir or / vampire like character. Now, the other thing is obviously that a lot of these characters tend to be necrotic, like damage dealers. They, that is the undeath realm. Necromancy is necrotic. So I'm going to focus on two subclasses that I feel are really great. And guess what? They are warlock subclasses. So the first subclass that I want to look at is the Grim Hollow. And I feel like this is going to be your traditional vampire build, like Danfear vampire build. Like, and you don't have to be and for this one, you don't have to be a Danfear. I just feel like the Danfear kind of fits into that. But with the first vampire patron from Grim Hollow, get the Grim Hollow player's book if you don't have it. They get this thing which is called like Drain Life, and what it does is, as a bonus action, you can do a unarmed attack that deals necrotic damage plus your charisma modifier when you take the attacker magic edge. So once you deal damage, you can do this, or when you take this action, then you can do this bonus attack, kind of like a monk, right? Like you attack, you hit with your unarmed attack, and this could be flavored like it could be a bite attack, it could be a claw attack. Unarmed attacks are really like, it's just you're not using a weapon. Now the interesting thing about this though is that means that unarmed attack is strength, unless you're a monk. So unless you do like a multi-class into monk or to get dex-based attacks, or you're just basically strength-based, and that's okay. This can work as a strength-based build. The other thing you get is you get dark vision, which is great, and then you have a bunch of spells. Bane, Command, False Life, Fog Cloud, Conjure Animals at a higher level. Dominate Person, great. Telekinesis is amazing. Creature of the Night is great because that whole like vampires turning into bats or rats or wolves, like having the polymorph spell available to you at level 6 that you can just do, but you can only do these 3 things, is amazing flavor. It's just great. Eldritch Appetite is interesting. When you reduce an enemy to 0 hit points with that bonus action life drain feature, you can take a reaction to consume their life force and gain an expended pack magic spell slot. You can't do that per long rest. So like it gives you back some of your power by stealing their life essence. So if we were like again a life essence, that's what we do. Because we're a Danfear, that's what we feed on. This is a great feature that feeds into that. And then we have Eternal Night, which kind of gives you a little bit more vampire-like regeneration. And then you can do a little bit more damage on your Drain Life, on your turn. So overall, the first Vampire Patron gives you a lot of stuff that you can do that's very vampire-esque. I really love it. The other thing, so this is what I would call like a very strength necrotic build, life essence draining kind of flavor. And the other one that just came out, which is a redesign, not really a redesign, but it's for 5.5. is the Undead Patron that just came out with the new Ravenloft materials. And again, in this one, we're talking about, we have this Form of Dread, which is a bonus action. So this one is really good if I feel like you're going for that psychic vampire. I feed off of emotion, because in this one, you are constantly giving the fear. You're constantly making people afraid of you. They, if we look down to once per turn, when you hit a creature with an attack roll, you can force them to make a Wisdom saving throw against your spell save DC. On a failed save, they become frightened and have that condition until the end of your next turn. So once per turn, while you're in your this undead visage Form of Dread, you can make someone frightened, and then you feed off of that fear. You're satiated from that. And I really love that idea of using fear as even more of a mechanic. And when we talk about Form of Dread, like for the role play, like If we look at like the Castlevania anime that came out a few years ago, like their eyes got red, their pupils became brighter, the nails grow, the fangs grow. Like your form of dread can take on anything that you want. So you become more vampire in your form of dread, right? You're really leaning into making your enemies fear you. And that is, you also gain like a couple things like temporary hit points, but you have immunity to the frightened condition. Again, we're a psychic vampire. We're dealing in making people afraid. Having immunity to the frightened condition is great. Undead spells, again, some crossover. Bane, one of them. Phantasmal Force is great. Speak with Dead, okay. Summon Undead is great. Greater Invisibility, Phantasmal Killer, Anti-Life Shell, Cloud Kill. Again, thematically, is pretty good. Arcane Necrosis. That means that like necrotic damage from your attacks, warlock spells, warlock features ignores resistance. So now when we're fighting other undead, we're getting past their defenses. That's great. You can once per turn when you cast a spell, you can change it to be necrotic damage. Let's see. When you're in your when you're in your form of dread, an attack and deal damage, you can kind of you can roll additional damage when you deal necrotic damage. So it's sort of like a little bit of a smite when you're in that form of dread. So you deal necrotic damage, you can deal an additional damage die of necrotic damage. So like a small little smite. So where we're kind of like getting a little bit more damage with our bonus attacks in the first Vampire Patron, in this one we are getting a little bit more bonus necrotic damage on our attacks at level 6. Still great. Necrotic Husk. We have resistance to necrotic damage while using your form of dread, and you have and then when you're using your form of dread, you have immunity to necrotic damage. So you are more undead. And then Unholy Resurrection. If you drop to 0 hit points, don't die outright. You can cause your body to erupt with deathly energy. This is very similar to what it was in 5e. Each creature of your choice in that emanation makes a Constitution saving throw against your spell DC and takes necrotic damage equal to 2d10 plus your charisma modifier on a failed save or half on a successful, and then your hit points then change to twice your warlock level and you gain some exhaustion. So you get hit, you don't die outright, which means that you don't get as much damage as your full hit points, and you come back up and you can only use it once per short rest. And then, superior form of dread. You have, when you're in your form of dread, you have resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, slashing damage. You have a fly speed. You can hover. You've got whenever you cast a warlock spell from conjuration or necromancy, you can cast it without verbal, somatic, or material components, except material components that are consumed. So a pretty good capstone here. So I love that there's different flavors of this, and then within that, right? So you're a warlock. There's a lot of other things that you can do. So I want to look at some of the feats too that go along with this. Now, when there's the Astarion's Book of Hungers came out, there's a bunch of vampire feats that came in there that kind of like help you. So let's just we're going to do Astarion's Book of Hungers. So let's take a look at what I really liked was the Cloying Mists, which was interesting. It's thematic, so not necessarily hugely mechanical, but a good mechanic one. You always have the fog cloud prepared. You can cast it without a spell slot. Whenever you cast fog cloud, the non-magical flames in the sphere are extinguished, and creatures other than you and your allies have their speed reduced by 5 while in the sphere. So like people are slowed or confused while they're in this this fog cloud. It's thematically like the Grim Hollow books First Patron. There's these things that make you a little bit more like a kind of like that story type vampire. Another one that was interesting that I liked was this Delicious Pain. Immediately after you take bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing damage, you can take a action to gain resistance to those three until the start of your next turn, and you can't use that. You can use that once per short rest. So it kind of allows you to get to that capstone of the undead patron a little faster. So there's some of that in there. And there's some other vampire ones like let's see, we'll go into Vampire Touched. So this is if you don't want to be a Dhampir. So I would use Vampire Touched as one of my feats, which allows us to get the Spider Climb spell, which allows us to do that Dhampir walk on walls kind of thing. And you can cast it once for free per long rest. And that one is pretty good. So I think with these types of vampire options, it allows you to kind of like build to different types of vampires. And I actually did a little bit of a build. We're going to go into my characters here. So here we go. So what I did was I did the two that I talked about. So first we're going to do the Undead Patron. And what I liked about the Undead Patron, and in both of these, is I did make them a melee kind of character. So what I did was I made them a Pact of the Blade. And I so that they were kind of like, there is a kind of a caster based vampire, which I would use like to be more magic based casting spells and whatnot. Maybe Pact of the Tome would be great. Pact of the Chain would also be there. Again, choose your own adventure. But what I liked about being a melee build was that it kind of gets to that, the Alucard from Castlevania vibe. If you want that, is really good. Plus, we're really going into charisma for a lot of these characters. And for the Undead Patron, because we want to be hitting, we want to be using the attack action, we want to be hitting a character so that we can create that frightened, creating that frightened condition on our enemies, because then we become like that satiated kind of vampire who's psychic based. What I did was I gave them a Lessons of the First one, and I gave them Cult of the Dragon Initiate. Now, that's from Forgotten Realms, but what that does is when you make someone afraid of you, you get inspiration. You get heroic inspiration. So, and you can do that once per long rest. So now, when you get satiated from your psychic, that psychic fear that you're giving someone, you can then get heroic inspiration. You are now fed. And I feel like that synergy is really good, because we want to reward, kind of like that feeling of being satiated. Again, in the normal videos I try to stick to the player's handbook, but there's so many things out there that we can do, kind of like things that we can pull in from other books, even from third-party content. So let's really look at that and see how we can really build a really fun vampire. So with this undead build that I did, it was a character I played. His whole thing was he was a Dexter, right? He was a killer of killers. He hunted down and he loved the scent of someone who is afraid of you. I can smell your fear, and it is delicious. Like, you want that kind of like gothic, kind of like confidence, and that's really going into like the charisma base. So I felt like that fear really was a great role play aspect, and even to intimidation checks. Like, let's go full into intimidation, and if we get skilled feat, we could become an expert in intimidation, really make our enemies afraid of us with sort of these intimidation checks. So that was because you're a warlock, you can get extra back origin feats, and that was a great origin feat that I got. I also got Vampire's Plaything for this one because that gives us a bonus action dash, which gives us a little bit of some speed. The original background for this was Shadowmoor Hexer. Shadowmoor Hexer comes again from the Forgotten Realms, and what that does is when I cast Hex on a person and then they hit me, they take psychic damage equal to my charisma modifier. So I felt like that was really good because I'm trying to make them afraid of me, and if they hit me, they're going to take damage. And I feel like that feeds into that psychic vampire role play that we're getting to. Let's see. I did Shadow Touched. I did Shadow Touch because when we get to our level 6 feature, I think it was, let me just go back here. Let's double check. It was when we get to, let's go back to Undead Patron. Level 6 was, it's our, we can deal extra damage when we deal necrotic damage. So what I loved in this build was from Shadow Touched, I get invisibility and I get inflict wounds, which I can use a pack slot. It deals necrotic damage, and now I can deal it I can deal more damage. What it becomes is basically at level 6, because I can cast it for free, I kind of get to upcast it when I'm in my form of dread. And it's like a grasp, like I have to touch you and I deal necrotic damage and I can make you afraid. Like, there's a lot of synergy again with inflict wounds, getting access to that. And then at level 8, I got Dragon Scarred, and that gives us, that's the upgraded part of the Cult of the Dragon. We get a charisma bump, and we get resistance to, I chose cold because I thought it was thematic. You could do poison too, because undead are typically resistant to poison. And then there's a fear mechanic that we get. It is wisdom based. I would talk to my DM about making that Cult of the Dragon origin feat be use my charisma modifier instead of my wisdom modifier for spellcat for the DC of that, because I do feel like dragon fear is typically either con or charisma based. But again, then I can, if for some reason I hit them and they don't get afraid, it's sort of like as a bonus action, I can try and make them afraid. Again, we're going with the fear. Before it was a magic action, so a little bit of a upgrade. Now as a bonus action, I can just try and make someone afraid of me. And if they fail, or if they succeed, they're immune to it for 24 hours. So it's sort of like an extra kind of like, attempt. And with most of my these builds, I'm going to level 12. So then I did Warcaster, and that just allows us to do a cantrip. And Chill Touch is great because it's necrotic. So like when they run away, I can try to do an attack of opportunity, or I can do a cantrip. And typically at these levels, one cantrip being like 3d10 is going to be, plus when we're in our form of dread, it might be like, or a 3d8 might be now 48, is typically going to be more than just one swing of a 1d8 plus 5. So I felt like the Warcaster really worked for this kind of, because we want to try and get as much necrotic attacks as we can. So this is kind of like fear lock, fear vampire lock. The other one that I did, was the first vampire patron. So for this, I did a multi-class, and I started with fighter because I was going strength-based with this, and I wanted to have chainmail or plate mail, a shield, and we're really diving into that melee-based one build. So then let's take a look at that one. So in this one, I'm looking at, we did the first patron. We're going to be doing for evocations. I like Magic Initiate because it gave us a couple more cantrips, but also gave us shield, right? Because I want to be, if I'm in the thick of things, shield is just a great additional spell to have access to. I did Agonizing Blast. That was pretty good. I did Skilled to get that expertise in, or to get another few proficiencies. That's the origin feat from Lessons of the First One. So Lessons of the First One's, again, getting us a few more origin feats, which is great. So then at level 4, we're going to go, we get our first ASI. I did ability score improvement because for these I'm doing array. So I want to bump up that strength. I want to have good con, good charisma, good strength. And then at level 8, I chose Infernal Dragoon. So the Pact, I chose a Pact Seeker as the origin feat for this character because it gives us some interesting additional capabilities. So here I get this devilish aura, so I kind of like I can emanate fear. You get Devil's Favor, which gives you a little bonus to a D20 test. And this magic weapon was interesting because now once per day, like we can make our weapon a magic weapon. So it's just a free +1 weapon. Now typically at higher levels you're going to have better weapons, but it just felt like it was a kind of interesting way. Like I wanted this sort of aura, this fear aura, to on demand, kind of like felt really good with this melee character. And if we look at the origin background, I chose the Pact Seeker, and I chose Infernal Pact, which gave us resistance to fire and poison damage. Again, going for the undead. Poison is typically something they're resistant to. It gave us the ability to see in dim light and darkness, both magical and non-magical. So we got like that invocation that normally warlocks get. We get this for free, and then it gives us proficiency in deception. So a couple of different ways to look at how you want to build a vampire. There are obviously other ways. Like I said, you could go, you could build a Damphir, you could go, necromancy, wizard. You could be you could do something more necrotic with, say, a ranger. But I feel like what Grim Hollow really did with the first patron warlock really feels thematic. And then when we talk about these dark anti-hero or these cursed, afflicted individuals, I feel like we want mechanics that are dark in nature, that kind of bring out that brooding, dark, I don't want to say evil, but like sinister forces that cause this affliction. And the undead patron also does that in spades. But I do think that we definitely want to look, when you're dealing with these types of discussions with your dungeon master around origins, for your vampire-esque character, there's a lot of options out there into how you can build them. What I didn't look at is like, what if your character did subsist on blood and it was the dealing of blood? There's a couple. Grim Hollow has a good one. There's also Sangromancy, which is the use of blood. So you could definitely like be. There are rogues that go into that. There are wizards that use Sangromancy. So the use of blood magic would be great in this type of one. Whether you siphon that magic from your enemy or whether you're using your own blood, that could also be a space to go. But I didn't want to get into too much. I'm more of an expert on the warlock stuff, and I felt like the packs with these undead vampiric patrons was really a good thing to kind of go into if you're looking for that vampire feel, and it kind of really gives it. Doesn't mean that that's the only way. Definitely some things. Do check out Grim Hollow, a great campaign setting, if you like the dark aspects of role playing. So that's it. It's actually longer than I thought it would be, but I hope this gives you some inspiration on how to create that vampire character. And if you have any questions, put it in the comments. But otherwise, till then, get out there and get creative.